Okay. And it's nice to see you. Hello, Barbara. Hello, Renee, Misty, Danielle, Rachel. It's nice to see you all. And Andy and Marcia, everybody. We'll start with our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Welcome. As I said in my email, next week will be our last time to meet. And then I'll be off for the month of July when hopefully our kids are coming from Israel. And we will resume, and I'll send this out. We will resume on July 29th. So that's when we will resume after next week. So next week will be our last class for a little while. And again, I'll miss you. But all right. So this week is Parsha Balak, one of two Parshas named for somebody who's not Jewish. The other person who has a Parsha named for him is Yitro, Moshe's father-in-law. Yitro and Balak both represent the opposite kinds of reactions to hearing about the wonderful things that God has done for the Jewish people. In Parsha Yitro, it says that when Yitro heard, he was overjoyed and he came running to the camp, not just because Moshe was his son-in-law, but because he was genuinely happy for the Jewish people and saw it as a demonstration of God's protection of the Jewish people, God's involvement, and he wanted to be part of it. Balak, King Balak, sees the Jewish people and what has happened to them and everything that God has done for them. And he responds in the opposite way by feeling that the Jewish people are a threat to him. It's interesting that these two models basically are the models of the world. This is how the world responds in one of these two camps. Either it's like, wow, the Jewish people are blessed by God, let's be with them and help them and be a part of it. Or not necessarily converting, but let's be a part of it. Or the Balak response, which is they are a threat, let's get rid of them. When whatever they're doing had nothing to do, again, with Yitro and had nothing to do with Balak. It's just their response to it of how they see it as this is amazing, let's be a part of it, or this is a threat, let's destroy them. What's interesting about Balak is that he was aware enough as a king, he was aware enough to see how the Jewish people had been saved and helped and aided and abetted by God, that he knew that he was not going to be successful in going to battle with them. So that's very interesting, that he was wise enough to know, I will not be successful going to physical battle. So he chooses a spiritual path because he recognizes the Jews have a spiritual strength that allows them to be successful physically. And so that's why he hires the prophet Bilam to curse the Jewish people, to figure out where is the spiritual weakness of the Jewish people, to curse them and to direct God's anger at the Jewish people rather than God's love and help. And he recognized that that was going to be the only way. So what's interesting is even though he draws the wrong conclusion about what his role should be, and he should have been applauding it because the Midianites and the Moabites, those are people who should have had a camaraderie with Moshe and the Jewish people. Yitro was a Midianite, and the Moabites were the descendants of Lot. So they're kinsmen to the Jewish people. So their responses are not because they didn't never heard of the Jewish people, they didn't attend a, Judaism 101 class to understand who the Jewish people were. Everyone was well aware of who the Jewish people were and what their strength was. So it's interesting that even though he decides to go on the wrong path, he does choose a spiritual approach, which is interesting because that's actually the equation. The strength of the Jewish people is built on our spiritual strength. When the Jewish people are spiritually strong, that's when we prevail, and not in a triumphalistic way, but that's when we're able to proceed without being persecuted and attacked and everything else, as we are given strength and a certain kind of immunity when we are spiritually strong. So that was his strategy, was how can I find the spiritual weak point and then go in that way, and that was going to be the answer. So often, as we see, our enemies understand us sometimes better than we understand ourselves. And so he understood that it was a spiritual equation, that the physical was not going to be successful. That was a no-win. And then what's interesting that happens, as we all know, or as many of us know, the prophet he hires, who is evil, Bilam the prophet, he hires him to curse the Jewish people, and he tries to curse the Jewish people 3 separate occasions from 3 separate mountains. And the only thing that comes out of his mouth is a deluge of blessings of the Jewish people, one of which is preserved in our davening, in our morning, that we say, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkanotecha Yisrael. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. And this is a blessing of a recognition of the beauty and sanctity and the holiness of Jewish homes and of our study halls, which is the foundation of what makes the Jewish people great. So we have preserved his would-be curse turned into blessing as part of our davening, which I find kind of interesting. It's like, okay, you intended it for harm, but God intended it for good, and we're going to incorporate this into our actual prayers and our recognition, because again, if our enemies can see it, how much more so should we be able to see it and live up to it as well? Okay, excuse me. Okay, we want to look now, and this comes from Rabbi David Foreman. So I don't know, Patricia, I don't know if you had listened to Rabbi Foreman about Balak this week, if you had seen any of that. Okay, good. That makes me happy, because that means, all right. So what we're going to do is, Rabbi Foreman is, we've talked about it before, everything he does, the way his mind works is he uncovers the amazing through observing the obvious. And it's like, oh, it's right there in front of your faces, because he asks questions that we don't ask because we're so used to the story. So the question he wants to ask is to back up, and then we'll see how this Parsha fits into it, is what is the role of the Jewish people? Like, what is our role? What is it that we're supposed to do? So anybody who'd like to unmute and just offer, what is the role of the Jewish people? What are we supposed to be doing?
To bring morality and the right way of living to the world.
Okay, so hold that idea, to bring morality and the right way of living to the world. And we're going to talk about how do we do that. Patricia.
Belief in one God.
Okay, so what are we supposed to do with the belief in one God? Is that
so it's not like everyone should become Jewish. It's so that everyone should believe that God is the creator and sustainer.
Okay, how do we do that? How does that idea translate into a role? What is it we're supposed to do?
I don't know. I'm going to throw out mitzvot. I don't know.
Okay, all right, we're on the right track here. Do mitzvot. Okay, so do mitzvot, the right way to live, morality. Anybody else? Any other ideas of what it is we're supposed to be doing? Helene, I can see you getting ready to unmute.
We're supposed to be, the light upon the nations, so that we become, we supposed to give out our
light. Okay, we're to be a light unto the nations, give out our light. Very good. Renee.
Well, that was pretty good, but I'll add to it then. Follow the halacha, follow the Torah, follow the I'm going to say like the manual that God gave us.
Okay.
He needs to have that connection for his creation.
Okay, so we're supposed to follow. So that's related to Patricia of the mitzvot, relationship with God, one God. We're supposed to teach that, a light unto the nations, morality, ethics, the right way to live, all of that. That's what that's what we've always been told, right? That's our path. So now we're going to talk about a light. We're going to shine a slightly different light on this, because we're going to go back to the beginning with Abraham. So it's interesting. One of our challenges, honestly, is that we as Jewish people look at ourselves as a religion. It's like Judaism is not a religion. A religion is what we, a group of people, think about God. Judaism is what God thinks about humanity, because God spoke to Abraham to tell him what his role was vis-a-vis the entire humanity. So it wasn't like, I am God and I'm here, and now you know that I exist. From the very beginning, an equation was set in motion, and yet we don't look at it. So even just if you just remember from your beginning, going way back to Genesis, when God first talks to Abraham, what does he tell him? He tells him, Lech lecha, leave your place. And so we're going to skip the part about leave your family, leave your place of your birth, leave your father's house. And what does God tell him is going to happen? What is it that God wants from him? Does anybody remember what he says to him? Like what the promise is? Renee, if you want to unmute.
Oh, he's supposed to go into the land.
Okay, he's supposed to go into the land. Yes, Renee, do you want to add to that?
And that land is going to be Hashem's land.
I'm sorry?
We're supposed to go into the land and take the land and like leave his father's house. So leave everything that he's known and go into
Go to the land that I will show you.
Right.
Isn't it also
right? But I feel like, I don't know how to articulate this, but we're supposed to be sort of like part of God's hand. Like we're supposed to be doing what God wants us to do, and we're kind of like working for God. That's kind of how.
Okay. We are working for God. We are God's agents. We are God's agents. Helene, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say he makes us a numerous or multitude of nations that we populate the world. So like the sand or whatever he says.
Okay. So let's go with that. So let's take a look at it. If you have a Chumash, if you want to turn to page 55, or if you're working from something else, it is Genesis chapter 12. And we're going to look at verse 2. And it says, and I will make of you a great nation. Okay, this is not a religion. This is a nation. I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. What's the role of the Jewish people? To be a blessing. How's that going to work? Okay, so here's part of the equation. I will bless those who bless you, and him who curses you, I will curse. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. What is the relationship? What is it? How are the families of the rest of humanity going to find blessing in their lives? What do they have to do?
Let's reciprocate and bless God.
Look again. It says, those who bless you, the Jewish people, I will bless those, I, God, will bless those who bless you, the Jewish people. And him who curses you, the Jewish people, I will curse. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves through you, by you. It's going to be a very indirect relationship. It's not that we are going to bless people or that we are going to curse people. And it's not directly that God is going to bless humanity directly or curse humanity directly. There's a little piece in there in the equation. How does God decide who will be blessed and who will be cursed? It's going to be based on, yes, Patricia.
Whether they bless us or not.
Whether they bless us or not. So our role is not to bless other people. Our role is to live the life that causes other people to bless us. And their reward, if you will, for blessing us is that they will be blessed. If they curse us, they will be cursed. So this sounds really funny, and no offense to, education that goes around that tries to stop anti-Semitism and all these other things. Is it our problem that people curse us? It's like, it's not our problem. That's not our problem. It's also not our problem that they bless us. We, in a way, are an independent factor in what we are supposed to be doing. Our job is to engage and follow the Torah and lead the life that God has commanded us through the Torah to the best of our ability, creating a people and a nation that is ideally seen in the land of Israel, that the world will see this is what it looks like for a people to live in a place and have a society that is, as you mentioned, moral, ethical, leading the right life, following the mitzvot, living the life of Torah that God has commanded us. We are in a covenant relationship to do this. That is really our only responsibility. Then other people will get to decide for themselves. Do they want to see this as a blessing? Do they want to be a Yitro person? Do they want to see this as like, wow, this is amazing. Look at God's people. How can I be a part of that? Not necessarily by converting, but how can I get on that path? Or are you going to have a Balak response of get rid of those people? But we don't actually have a direct relationship with either one, which I think is really a novel understanding. And it's clear, this isn't, you don't have to like go this way or that way in the text to see that's exactly plainly what it says. God says, I, God, will bless those who bless you, the Jewish people, and I will curse those who curse you. And that is how blessing is going to come into the world. That's the mechanism. Thoughts or responses to this, because this takes us in a very different direction than how we tend to normally think of what it is we're supposed to be doing. Andy.
I'm struggling with the challenge of God cursing those who curse us, and just what's happening now across the world and what's always been happening. I'm not seeing that happen.
Yeah, we would like it a little bit quicker response. Can we see that curse? Like, I hate to say this, can we see a little bit quicker response here? However, if you take the long-term perspective, somebody who is, I think it's Rabbi Ken Spiro, has a t-shirt, and on it is a list of all the nations that tried to destroy us and are no longer here.
Yeah.
And then there's like the Jewish people. And again, it's not that we're looking for people to disappear. That's not our game. Our end game is not like, oh, great, God curse everybody and then we'll be done with everybody and then we can have the whole world. That's not our plan. Our plan is for everybody to bless us, not to pat us on the back, but so that they get the blessing that they're entitled to for seeing who it is we really are. If we are seeing that it's not working so well, then we have to turn the light on us. Because if we as the Jewish people are not living up to what it is that's our part of the equation of living the lives of Torah to the best of our ability and manifesting that, then we're in a way giving the world a mixed message. And then it looks like we think that we're just chosen for, I don't know, for grandeur or something, and not that we've been chosen to play this very unique and I find very fascinating role with humanity. So when we see that the world is kind of going like this, then our response has to be, what are we doing wrong that is not resulting in more people blessing us? And again, this is not coming from a triumphalistic place. It's not coming from like, we're better than other people. We're not saying we're better than other people. In fact, we're saying the problem might be that we're really not doing what we're supposed to do. We need to check into how are we fulfilling this commandment? How are we fulfilling this equation? Because it's a very simple equation. It just has a lot of ramifications to it. Now, it's also hard because we live in exile. We're not, all of us here today, we are not yet living in the land of Israel, showing the world what this formula looks like. So people are getting, including ourselves, we're trying to create a formula in an environment that is not exactly conducive to it. It's not conducive to it. You know, it's not so hard to, it's not so easy to observe the Torah outside the land of Israel. In the land of Israel, life is hard as a person. I mean, opening up your checking account and savings account and getting to the bank and your whatever, your medical whatever, real hassle. Being Jewish in the land of Israel, really easy. You have to kind of go out of your way to make it hard. Okay, so it's right there. The whole system is structured. So we are at a disadvantage. So in a way, we have to plead to God to say, in a way, what do you want from us? We are living in exile. We're living in a Christian world. We are going against we're swimming upstream and we're doing the best we can. And that is then what we are expected to do. So notice in each of those statements, it was fulfilling the Torah as best we can to give as clear a message of what it is that God wants from all of humanity vis-a-vis the Jewish people. And that's the question we need to ask ourselves. How well are we doing that? How well are we doing that? Helene, did you have something else to add?
Yeah, I'll argue a little bit with you in the fact of being in Israel and seeing all the conflict and things that are going on with the Palestinians and all that. And I just kind of think like what I think is important to really realize here is the big picture is the not just the Holocaust. So that doesn't, jive with what we're talking about and all the pogroms, that doesn't jive either. But what jives is, and I think we all know that we have existed, we have overcome, we're still here, which is the most amazing thing in the whole wide world as far as I'm concerned. However, I think it gets back to that moral truth thing and living a good life. And I think with so much happening these days, that becomes very difficult. And how do we get our children more involved in this morality of Judaism and keeping and knowing or trying to know Torah? I mean, I just see social media taking over so badly that our children and my children, to get them to understand what I understand or love what I love is very difficult. And I don't know how to do that.
You are absolutely right. It is so difficult. So let's talk about several things of what you're saying. First of all, when I said it's easy to be Jewish in Israel, it's not a panacea. I mean, for sure. And I mean, it's, I know people may disagree with this or whatever, but I'll just put it out there. The state of Israel is not run according to the Torah. It is not. There are things, I mean, that, it isn't. So it's just easier because there's a majority of Jewish people there. So, finding kosher food, kosher restaurants, if you want to take Shabbos off, you don't have to plead with your employer and lose money. You don't have to use all your vacation time for the Jewish holidays. All those little things, the Little League is not on Shabbos, like all the things that make up how we live our lives, it's easier there. However, if you have a Seder in the old city of Jerusalem, at the end of the Seder, you say, Shana Haba'a b'Yerushalayim, next year in the rebuilt Jerusalem. It is in progress, but it's not there yet. The question is, what will make it get there? So this equation is, when the Jewish people follow the Torah, these other things will resolve. We think that our response is supposed to be direct, us against them or whatever we think. It's not, that's not the equation. The equation is the stronger the Jewish people are spiritually, people will come forward to bless us and blessings on them. And those who don't, won't, and they will disappear. What we have now is we have a cholent. We have like a mixture of, it's so ungepachked that we don't even know what we're doing or what it is we're supposed to be doing. Yeah. So it's confusing for people in Israel. It's confusing for people in the United States. It's confusing everywhere. So the question is, what are we supposed to do? So it helps if we go back though to the basic, like let's go back to the basics. What are we supposed to do? We are supposed to follow the Torah to the best of our ability in our current circumstances. Period. How do we influence other people? Talk about children and grandchildren or all these other people, friends, family. Guess what? We can't. We have to do it. We do what we do. The same way it's another indirect relationship. We do the best we can with what we know, when we know it, and then it has to spill over. And they have to see like, oh, that looks worth having. Now, the challenge is the mores of our society have made a lot of what we think is worth having into non grata, like we don't want this. So we have to deal with that reality. And it is really swimming upstream.
Yeah.
And we need to be strong to do that. So there's one thing that swimming upstream helps you do, which is it gets you to be stronger swimming upstream. So swimming upstream is hard, but that's what the Jewish people have always done in every circumstance. We can go back to Abraham, in a pagan world. It says one of the reasons he's called Abraham HaIvri, the one where we get the word Hebrew, that we're the Hebrews, we're the ones who are on the other side. It says the whole world was on one side philosophically, and Abraham and Sarah were on the other side. So this isn't new. And perhaps that's what can help us persevere. So it's not just a matter of, yes, we've lived through the pogroms and the expulsions and the Crusades and the Inquisition and the blah and the Holocaust and everything else. That's true. We have. It's not obvious all individuals. We've survived as a people, and we're guaranteed to survive as a people. So we don't have to worry about an existential threat to our existence. Because as somebody said, we work for God. We're God's agents in the world. So unless God gives up on humanity, God cannot give up on the Jewish people, no matter how poorly we're doing. So we know that when we were in Egypt, we were at the 49th level of spiritual impurity, which means that's 49 out of 50. That means we were barely hanging on. And God was like, I'll save you. So we don't need to worry. Sometimes people are like, oh, our numbers are shrinking. The Jews aren't going to survive. Take that whole worry off the table. That is not our problem. So we know we're going to survive. Our goal, however, is to thrive and not just survive. But we only thrive to the extent that each individual person is thriving as a Jewish person. And I don't mean just as a general good person. Being good people is for the rest of humanity. The Jewish people have a covenant to be good Jewish people. Yes. And that has a framework. That has a system that determines what that is. And we know what that is. How we do it is very challenging, and it may be harder. It may be harder to be in a place that has always been welcoming to Jewish people. We have lost more people through assimilation and intermarriage than we've lost through anything else that has happened to us, because people are so nice to us, and because in a way they're like, you're fine, you're like us. So that's actually could be even more of a challenge, is surviving the good times, maybe more challenging than surviving the difficult times. When the Nazis are after you, you pretty much know you're in trouble. You pretty much know who the enemy is and what the challenge is. In the case of it's like the end of this Parsha. The end of this Parsha is where Bilam gives advice to King Balak after being unsuccessful in cursing the Jewish people. He says, I'll tell you what you do. You get the men to act immorally because God hates immorality. So they set up stores, and they had a very specific strategy. No offense against us older women, but they set out older women who were not as compelling out in the front of the store. And when the Jewish men would go shopping, like in the shuk, and they would come up and they didn't have any concern about, talking to this older woman, they weren't enticed by her. And she would just say, the more attractive, the better merchandise is inside. So the better merchandise is inside, and inside was the very attractive Midianite woman who was dressed in like, I'm not sure what, or undressed in whatever. And then she would lure the man and entice him. And then things went downhill very quickly after that. So that's where we get next week's Parsha of Pinchas. Things go very, very poorly. And what Bilam was unsuccessful doing in cursing the Jewish people, King Balak is able to do through this enticement. It says enticement is a bigger challenge. Enticement, think of all the fun things. You know how long it took me to throw away the advertisements for Macy's for the Saturday only sale? I mean, like, oh my gosh, the sale's on Saturday, it's on Shabbos. The flights, there's a good deal, there's a good flight on Saturdays. You know, oh, but my kid has to play whatever, the best team, the greatest coaches on Saturdays. My kids, that's when the dance is, that's when the prom is, that's when homecoming is. They have to, that's when the theater is. It's the enticement that is our challenge. It's like, okay, if Jews actually do very well when there is a face-to-face threat for someone who's trying to directly kill us. We do really well on that. We don't do so well on the enticement, because even though people accuse us that we're always keeping to ourselves, the opposite is true. The Jewish people love other people. We love other cultures. We love anything. We love it all. And we are enticed. And that's our challenge. And that's how this week's Parsha ends, is with the enticement. So the question is, so what kind of environment do we need to structure for ourselves where the enticements are not enticing, or where we have something else that is more enticing than those enticements? And that's what I was saying, that living in this, in our, any place outside the land of Israel becomes very hard because of the enticements. Israel has a lot of challenges and a lot of things are not going so smoothly there, but they don't have that. And that makes a huge difference for us. How hard is it? It's just really hard. I have to say, when we were in Manhattan and we were walking home from shul on Shabbos morning, and you know, you smell like the restaurants and the coffee houses are open. Of course, it's Manhattan. That's not Jewish. We're not expecting it to be. And I'm looking in, it's all these outdoor, because of COVID. Hold on one sec. Do you know how many Jewish people I saw sitting at those cafes? Not that you can always tell who's Jewish, but you know, sometimes you can, especially if they're wearing a Jewish star around their neck. You know, it's kind of a giveaway. It's like, they're in the cafes. It's like, why are you there? No one forced you to do that. It's like, because it's enticing. It's Saturday morning. It's a beautiful morning. What am I going to do? It's the golf course. It's the coffee. It's the yoga class. It's the whatever. All of those things grab us. And that's our challenge. So we are challenged by all of it. And it's like, God, help us. You know, please help us. Help us do what you want us to do so that we can truly bring blessing to the world. Because our not living up to that is causing blessing to be withheld from the world. So if we really want blessing to come to the world, as we all do, we want blessing to come to all of humanity. The biggest favor we can do for humanity is to do Jewish. It sounds like a funny equation. We think, no, they'll like us more if we join them and do whatever they're doing. It's like, no, that actually doesn't work. What works is when we do Jewish. It's the longer path, and it's indirect, but it's the equation that we were given. Thoughts, ideas? This is really challenging. Anybody? Yes, Danielle.
You know, to me, it's sort of like you got to be true to yourself, and like people can really see like when you're faking it, and in a way, it's almost insulting to them when you try and like fake it and to go along with what they're doing. So when you're true to you, like it makes them respect your Jewishness and the things that you're doing, and it also brings in questions in a good way where they want to know more, and there's a lot more respect in that because you're not faking it with them.
You are absolutely right. So here's the thing, again, it's like a conundrum for us because we think they'll like us if we're like them. It's like, no, they won't. It'll be short term, and it always turns. And being true to ourselves, this is the Jewish people need to be true to who we are, because we are an essential piece of the puzzle for all of humanity. And bizarrely enough, some of their hostility may actually be a very indirect form of you're not being true to who you are. You're trying to be like us. You're not being true to who you are. You're fake Jews. We've been called that. You're fake Jews. You don't, we've been told by some of our enemies, you don't follow the Torah. You're not the real Jews. And then they'll say, we're the new Jews. It's like, that's so strange. We need to actually be ourselves. I think I've shared with you before that the most bizarre thing I saw when I was a student at DU was the Jewish fraternity having a toga party. Jews don't do togas. That's like not a concept. We don't do togas. It's like, who do you think you are? First of all, okay, you could say that we're not part of a Greek system. The whole thing, a Greek system is already a little bit of a stretch. But let's say, okay, there's a lot of merit for all that. But a toga party, it's like you're pretending to be non-Jews and you're a Jewish fraternity. It's like, that's not going to get you anywhere. It doesn't get us anywhere. So the best thing is to be more of who we are. And I have to say, there is some cover for this in this day and age when everybody's like, you be you, you do you, everyone should love you for who you are. Do you notice that the only people who are not included in that equation are Jews? It's like everybody else, you whatever gender you want to be, whatever this you want to be, whatever that would be, but not Jewish. It's like, in a way, they're really asking for us, stand up and be you. You have to be Jewish in order for this whole thing to work. They just don't know what to do with it because they didn't read Bereshit. They didn't read the statement unless you're some Christian groups, when they'll say, just a second, Renee, and I'll remind me so I can call on you. I think I shared with you, this was back in the days when we were walking to shul, that we were walking to shul and we walked past this man's house and this man was out working in his yard. And he goes, have a wonderful Sabbath. We said, thank you. He said, and God bless you. I was like, oh, thank you. And then he carried on and on. He said, I know that whoever blesses the Jewish people is blessed. And I just want you to know how much I love the Jewish people and you're amazing. And we just want the blessing that comes from you. I'm like, you got that right. You got that right. Now, this is just like a little old person standing on Magnolia Street. This was not like a spiritual giant, but he was right. And again, it's not because we're getting something for it. It's that we want to be the method, the spigot for other people to get blessings, and God should bless you. And he wanted to shake Steve's hand, and because we were Jewish. Thank you. That's exactly right. Renee, if you want to unmute. And then Misty, I saw you also had a.
Okay. So I've been thinking about this actually for the last couple of weeks. So it's interesting, the coincidence. I appreciate it. So you're talking about, what's that word about being enticed? I'm just thinking the whole world lives in a Western civilization. Western civilization is based on, the Romans and the Greeks and Latin and science. And I'm not saying that we don't have that in Judaism because, being compassionate to animals came first in the Torah. Organic gardening was in the Torah. I mean, way before everybody thinks they created all this stuff. But that's not what the world follows. And that's why part of me is confused. It's kind of a weird question, but we live in a Western civilization, our math, our English.
Yes, we live in a Western civilization, and much of what is Western is good because it came from the Torah. And that's why they talk about, Judeo-Christian, whatever. There is a tremendous overlap in many values. Some of that's fraying pretty quickly, but and we are there to support the things that are in sync with the Torah. And if they're not in sync, we reject it. And if it's in sync, we support it. And we do not hide ourselves. So the other challenge we have is with the increased anti-Semitism, Jews are going into hiding. I have to say, I admit, when we were in New York, I said to Steve, you need to wear a baseball cap when we're walking on the streets, because men who are visibly Jewish are getting attacked. So I'm not willing to do that. That being said, that's just like a case of, personal safety, but we cannot hide who we are. We need to be us and make it more. We think, well, if we would just, and this has been a thing for the Jewish people forever. If we would just, disappear, the German saying, be a yid in the home and a mensch on the street. And they weren't using the word mensch to mean like how we use mensch. They mean be like a regular person. Don't stand out as a Jew. Like, save that for private, separation, church and state. And I'm not saying about putting church and state together in the United States. It's a whole different concept. But to be proudly Jewish and doing Jewish. And that is what we need to do. And it's very hard in a Western world, because we have to constantly review what are our values, where do they overlap, and where do they not. So we're totally into science and math. We talk about the Menorah, the 7 branches of the Menorah that was in the temple. Those 7 branches stand for the 7 natural wisdoms, which include math, astronomy, medicine, all those things that because it's the workings of creation. We appreciate God's creation. I think I told you with our son Benjamin being sick and having the issues with his ear, that how much he has been inspired to talk to the audiologist and to the hearing specialist about the inner workings of the ear, to gain more appreciation and love of God as the creator of the human body. We are totally into that, totally. But it has to be connected to God. That's where we do. It's like, so it's almost anything that's in the world has a proper place. We're not into rejecting large swaths of anything of the world. It's just it needs to be attached to God. And maybe that's also, Renee, what you were alluding to earlier. We said our relationship with God, our love of the physical body is God created it. Our food that we're enjoying, we love food. We love food. That's part of God's promise to the Jewish people. You'll go into the land, you're going to eat yummy food, and you're going to be satisfied, and you will bless me. So it's all attached to God. Sexuality, we love sex, the right person, the right time, in the right way, connected to God. So all of the things, all of the elements are there. It's just we need to put God into the equation. And when that's done, that's what's called making it Jewish. Because we're not this, like someone said before, we are supposed to go into the land of Israel and set up a society with cities. Do you know in the Torah, it lays out urban planning, and it talks about how much land of grassland that you need to have that is open, like a buffer between areas of intense civilization? Because the whole point is to have a functioning world. This is not Machu Picchu. This is not the Vatican. This is a functioning society, which means you're going to have the dry cleaners, you're going to have the mechanic, the mail carrier, the laundromat, the road repair people, but they're all functioning in a Torah framework. And that's called serving God. That's what we're supposed to be doing. So we have a challenge. Living outside of the land of Israel, and even in the land of Israel, whatever it is, we have a challenge of how do I make that a reality in my life? How do I attach it? And part of it is knowing that it's there to be attached, that we don't compartmentalize our lives like, oh, this is a Jewish thing, and this is like a regular life thing. It's all Jewish. It's all Jewish. So you may want to think about where's an area in your life that maybe has been like good person life, but not necessarily attached to God life. And where's the place? How does it get attached? How do I bring it, the equation in? Because that's what we're supposed to do. It's not enough just to be a good person. Though actually being a good person means to be good, means to fulfill your potential. And since the definition of, therefore, a good Jewish person is different than a definition of a good non-Jewish person. The definition of a good non-Jewish person is for them to fulfill their potential as a good non-Jewish person. Through the 7 laws of B'nai Noach, they have certain laws they are supposed to fulfill. And to be a good Jewish person means to be Jewish person and to fulfill our potential as a Jew. And that's a different equation. It's the, I don't know, you want to call it advanced, whatever you want to call it, more complicated. It's a slightly different version of that. And people will say, people say this, like to Jewish teachers all the time, well, I'm not such a good Jew. I'm a good person, but I'm not such a good Jew. I'm like, is that okay with you? And then what does that mean? What does that mean? It's not okay. It's like not okay. You can say I'm a growing Jewish person and I'm not as good as I could be, and I would like to be better. Mazel tov, join the crowd. That's where we all are at. But to like dismiss, like, I'm a good person, I'm just not a good Jew. I'm like, what does that even mean? So that's not a place to be. That's not an option. Not an option. Misty, did you have something you'd like to?
Yeah, in every place that we have ever been throughout our history, we have contributed.
Absolutely,
often,
so right.
Often well beyond the proportion of the population we are. And what we have done has benefited everybody. And I mean, today, when you think of like the person who came up with the polio vaccine was Jewish, when you think of the science that's coming out of Israel that benefits everybody. And these people, these Jewish people that do this, I mean, when you think of the number of Jewish Nobel Prize winners,
30%.
Right, well above our proportion in the population, they may or may not be observant. Some of them may, the scientists in Israel, a number of them say, I'm an atheist. But what they're doing to benefit people is a way of doing Jewish.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that. They're wonderful contributions, but without the Jewish piece, doesn't work.
But everybody benefits by it, though. Jewish people, non-Jewish people, and I'm just saying there are ways of doing Jewish that maybe they're not even aware they're doing Jewish.
Yes,
but they're doing Jewish on some level.
They are doing Jewish on some level in helping humanity, but I'm going to offer that that's like a person who does the extra credit without doing the main assignment. In the end, it's not going to help because it doesn't say contribute to humanity in all of these other ways, and that will be instead of. There is no instead of. That is the challenge of this equation, is that there is a person. So I'll give you an example, and it's very challenging. And we have people in our own family, friends, amazing contributions, and bless them, and they are contributing to humanity. It's just that they are not contributing what they're supposed to contribute. That it's like saying, you tell your child, I'd like you to set the table and put the meat in the oven, etc. And you come home and they said, I painted the living room. It's like, that's not what I asked you to do. If you can paint the living room and do these other things, amazing, that will work, but not instead of. We cannot trade our assignment. And that is the challenge. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. And this always ruffles feathers. There is a blessing that we say there's a blessing that is said when we meet a non-Jewish scholar, someone who's in the secular world. There's a blessing for them, that God has shared some of his intelligence, wisdom with them. There is a blessing that we say for a Jewish Torah scholar. Mm. There is no blessing for a Jewish scholar who is not in the realm of the Jewish world. So Albert Einstein, we're very grateful to him, but we actually would not make a blessing on him because he did not fulfill in the realm of his main assignment. His main assignment is Jewish. If you can do the other things, and you can, plenty of people do. In fact, one of the recent Nobel winners, Professor Aumann, is an observant Jewish man and a Nobel winning These are not either or. This is not like, well, they beat their wives, but they've contributed so much to society. It's like your first responsibility is to have a relationship with your spouse that's good. If you can't do that, doing this thing is not instead of, it doesn't work. And in the end, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So you're right. Humanity has benefited tremendously, and humanity would benefit more if they added in the other piece. What can I say? Humanity has benefited tremendously, but we're depriving them of the main nutrients for the world's happiness by withholding the Jewish piece. When we do that, and Misty, you're right, that we can say that people who are making discoveries to help human beings, that they're doing incredible acts of chesed, incredible acts of kindness. And it may also be, so let's give the benefit of the doubt here. Let's say that the way they work, that the labs that they run, the way they treat people is above reproach, and that they are kind to their researchers, and that they're good to the whatever. You can say all of that, and they'll say, yes, we'll give them that credit for that. And they need to do the rest of it as well. That there was, when we accepted the Torah at Mount Sinai, we didn't say we'll take 6 through 8 and not 1 through 5. It's not that deal. Now, someone can say, I'm really trying, I'm really working, I'm growing, etc. That's true. A person can also say, and this would be part of our understanding, that in some ways, everything that we've just said is nullified by the fact that we have all grown up in a non-Jewish world. And we are all considered, you'll like this category, we're all considered kidnapped children, because there is a halachic standard that says, what is the accountability of a Jewish child who is kidnapped by Christians and raised Christian? Are they responsible for not having fulfilled the Torah? What do you think the answer would be? So Misty, I'll ask you specifically, what do you think the answer would be on that?
That's whatever I say, it's going to be the wrong answer.
No,
if I say yes, they're responsible, and the question is, well, maybe they don't even know that they're Jewish. However, if they do know that they're Jewish, then maybe, yeah, they are responsible for it. So it depends.
Okay, so you are right and right. Mm-hmm. So if somebody has been kidnapped and raised as a non-Jew, or even told, like, you know what, your parents were Jewish, but you're in our house now, and I'm raising you, how accountable are they? They're not so accountable, because they weren't given the education, the environment, or whatever. They are doing what they were raised to do. So these people who are, like, they say that they're atheists. First of all, when you talk to most of these people, they're not atheists, they're agnostics. They don't even know what they are. They were raised in the former Soviet Union, or their grandparents are from the former Soviet Union, or they were communists, or they were this, or they were that, or the other thing. All of us, me included, we were all kidnapped children. We've been raised in a non-Jewish Western culture, and even in the land of Israel, where people came and they're immigrants. Think about this. This is a young country. These are what, at the most, second generation people coming to this country, coming to the land of Israel. Israel was settled by anti-religious people, anti-religious. So you grow up in that environment, like the kibbutz that I lived on, Kibbutz Mizrah, it had a pork sausage factory. They were very adamant about serving a dairy dessert after their Friday night Shabbos dinner of meat. They thought that fasting on Tisha B'Av was malarkey. They were communists. They were socialists. They were anti-religion. So what do you think the kids growing up on that kibbutz are going to be like? they're going to be at least tilted in a different direction, unless they're very rebellious and become Hasidic and drive their parents really crazy, and go the opposite direction. So while we just said this is about what the responsibility is of the Jewish people, and that doing the dessert without the main course doesn't work, we also have to look at who these people were and are and how they were raised. So we're not like judging them and shaking fingers at them saying like, well, you're a worthless Jew. We're saying you were raised, you can guarantee they were raised by parents who valued secular education and put their emphasis and their praise and their encouragement on that. And that's how they taught people, that's how you be Jewish. So people do what they were raised to do. So the challenge is, okay, then how do we get out of that? It's like, we read this Parsha of Balak and we say, let's take a look at this. It's like, what is the deal really? So even if like the clouds part just a little bit in our eyes and in our minds and say, what is my primary responsibility? My primary responsibility is first to be a Jewish woman. And it's not an either or. This woman it's not like I will be a Jewish woman or I will be a scientist. That's not how it works. You can be a Jewish woman and a scientist. So we make this compartmentalized and our society makes it challenging. Because if you go and you have, and the debates, you're a great debater. Well, the debates team, the events, when are they? Friday night. Now you have a problem. What's going to be the answer? Are you going to the debate thing or are you staying home for Shabbos dinner? That's going to be the problem. And after you make a number of those decisions, it tilts you and sends you on a certain trajectory. So the question we need to ask ourselves that we're supposed to ask this week is, how am I doing in this role of being a Jewish woman, along with my other roles? Where have I compromised? Where maybe do I need to rethink about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it so that I make sure my number one priority is accomplished? A mother who has children, who takes care of everybody else's children and not her own, is this a good mother? It's not a good mother. Starts first things first. First things first. Our first thing first is we are in a covenanted relationship, which means we have a contract. And if we can do more, amazing. And there's no reason we can't. Again, how much time does it take to be a Jewish woman? Is there time involved? How much time do you think it is?
All of it.
I mean, on one hand, it's like all my time is, but it doesn't preclude it. So if I make kosher food, does that take any more time than making non-kosher food? No. It's a mindset of like, what's my priority? What am I trying to achieve? And that's my goal. So this is the Parsha where we ask ourselves that question. And we worry, honestly, less about our children and grandchildren and what they're doing. Not that we aren't worried about them, we are. But it has to start first with us. Just as the Jewish people will benefit humanity by first focusing on being Jewish, the people surrounding us will most benefit from us by taking our Jewish lives very seriously and seriously, joyfully. So the answer is not like a verkrumptepunim of like, ugh, now I have to be a Jewish woman. It's like, I have so much to do and now I have to do that. It's like, I'm so happy to be a Jewish woman. It should be, ideally, that when someone says, like, if you had to say, if you could say your identity in one word, the main thing we would say is, I'm Jewish. That is what describes me the most. And the fact that I'm an American, I'm Jewish, I'm a woman, I live in Denver, Colorado, all these other things all flow from that, but that is not the main point. So the main point is what God arranged with Abraham and said, those who bless you will be blessed. Those who curse you, I will curse. And you will bring blessing through the whole world. Because, and we have another, I'll end with this last thing. At Sodom and Gomorrah, when God warns, it tells Abraham, says, why does he tell him about the upcoming destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah? What's it to Abraham? He doesn't live there. It's because Abraham and the Jewish people are responsible for the whole world. So he says, this is chapter 18, verse 17. And Hashem said, shall I conceal from Abraham what I do now that Abraham is surely to become a great and mighty nation? And all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by him. For I have loved him because, why? Because he commands his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of Hashem, doing charity and justice, in order that Hashem might bring upon Abraham that which he had spoken of him. So why does God tell him this whole thing? Because Abraham is, all the nations are going to bless themselves through Abraham. And I know that Abraham is teaching his children and is following the Torah that I've given him, and that is going to bring blessing to the world. That's why he needs to be in on this conversation. Otherwise, that conversation doesn't make any sense. Why do I tell Abraham about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah? Because he's teaching his children? What does that have to do with anything? It's only because this equation is in place. Abraham is teaching his children. The other nations will see him. They will bless him. I will bless them. Therefore, if the nation is, I'm about to curse a nation, he needs to know, because it means that the equation didn't work in this matter. A little heavy, but important heaviness to think about for this week. We have a fast day on Sunday, the fast of the 17th of Tammuz. It's just a daytime fast, starts early in the morning, like 4 in the morning until after Havdalah time. And this commemorates the breach in the walls of Jerusalem that led to the destruction. We said on Tuesday, I'll just take 1 minute here to say this breach in the wall. You can have a breach in the wall that is leading toward destruction, or you can have a breach in the wall that lets in more light and is a process of remodeling. So if you were to go on, it's only when I know that when I turn on HGTV and I see people swinging hammers and sledgehammers and saws, and they're taking apart someone's house, I don't ever get alarmed thinking, oh my God, somebody just came in and destroyed those people's house. I'm like, wow, it's all ready for remodeling. So the fact that we have this time, this period on Sunday, when we have this fast day, there's a breach in the wall. And the question is, are we going to let it lead to destruction, or are we going to remodel? Remodel our house, remodel our Jewish home, and make it the place that is, as we started out the very beginning, with the blessing from Bilam. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkanotecha Yisrael. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. Between your homes and your study halls, that is the foundation of the Jewish people. Everything else is bonus gravy, and we get the homes right, everything else will follow from it. It will follow from it. It's like good health. It starts from the inside. It's only so much makeup you can put on to cover up the bags under eyes from not getting enough sleep. It's like you can hide it a little bit, but you can't really fake it. So our goal is to be truly, truly ourselves in this world. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everybody, and I will look forward to seeing you next week. All right.
Shabbat shalom, Ellyn.
Good Shabbos. Thank you for letting me respond to your question.
Ellyn, was that a podcast from David Foreman that you listened to?
It is on his website. It's called Aleph Beta. And it actually was not from this year. It was from a previous year.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, he's great.
Sounds like David. Yeah, it's great.
He's great. Yeah, and we didn't go into it, but in his description, Bilam's blessings, each of his blessings is a reference to the promises that were made to Abraham of you will have many children, you're like the stars, the sand, etc. You will vanquish your enemies, and all the families will bless themselves through you, through this equation. And those are the three would-be curses turned into blessings that are shrined. So it's almost like at the end of as we get to the end, because this is the 40th year of the Jewish people, we see this is being re-articulated, which is also nice. It could be like, maybe that was God's promise then, you know, when it was just Abraham, but now that it's all of us and so much has happened and we're not necessarily doing such a great job, is this still the way it works? So this is to reiterate, there's been no change. Contrary to Christianity thinking there's a new covenant, there is no new covenant. There is only this covenant, and that's the one we have. Renee.
Okay, I love how you started with talking about that Judaism is not a religion. I love it. I just like really shook it up. And I'm, you know how it's hard for me to articulate questions, but here I go, because you're always really good at answering them anyway. So
thank you. I'll try.
I have a job that just ended, but when times were starting to get slow, it gave me a lot of time to have conversation with people from all walks of life and different religions, etc. And it's so interesting because I had an experience of we would talk about things like philosophically and life and spirituality and stuff, and I keep coming back to, I felt really sorry for people that even though they were interested in God and interested in religion, etc., being good people, they didn't have that thing that, I don't even know how to describe it. And I'm leading up to my question. It just, like, I have something that was just given to me that has to do with some kind of like a depth of connection with Hashem. It's like not about religion. And I can't even explain it to me. And I would feel like, I feel so sad for people that didn't have that. And so here's my question. And so I get a lot of pushback, especially people that, I'm just gonna, like, let's say a man that's interested in me who's not Jewish, and he's giving me this pushback, and I'm like, you have to understand, I'm Jewish. And he's like, from people that are not Jewish, they look at it and they overlay their Christianity, or and these are people that say, well, I'm anti-religious, I'm spiritual, so I don't care what religion you are. And it's like, do you understand there's this huge disconnect, and I just don't know how to make them understand.
You can't. You cannot. You cannot make them understand. They will not understand. And you just need to be Jewish and do Jewish. They are operating from a different framework. And unless their questions are not really questions, their questions are challenges with a question mark at the end of it, because they already have their position. And people who have positions don't really have questions. So there is no response to it. There just isn't. I was telling somebody this morning, when I worked at the First National Bank of Denver, I was in the human resources department, and the employee newspaper did a feature about Hanukkah. And there was me and another man who actually lives on the West Side. We were like the Jewish people who were interviewed about Hanukkah. And we were both very knowledgeable about it. So we didn't give like the stupid description of what Hanukkah is. We gave like the real description. And afterwards, one of my colleagues in the human resources department was like, that was so interesting. So does that mean like you really, really don't believe in Jesus? And I'm like, we really, really don't. He says, like, not even a little? Like, no, it's like, and you don't do like Christmas, just like a little bit of Christmas for your kids, so they won't feel left out and whatever. And I'm like, nope. I said, Hanukkah has nothing to do with Christmas. It only has to do with anything because they occur at the similar times of the month. And it has nothing. I said, Judaism does not believe in Jesus in any way, shape, or form. They could not get it. It's like not even like, would you say he was a wise man? I'm like, no. Like, to the extent that he said that the path is through me or whatever. It's like, no, that is called a false prophet. No. So it's just like, oh, well, he was a good person, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no. So they're not going to get it. Yeah, you'll know if somebody is sincerely interested in learning about that versus just challenging you. There's nothing you can say.
Yeah. Ellyn, I think there's something called a Jewish soul.
Absolutely. We were stamped in Sinai.
Right. And I think, at least I know I have one. It depends on other people. I think that's part of it. And it's something that's unexplainable, but it's something that for me, I had a very religious great grandmother who I feel and I'm named after her. So I feel that coming down because my other people in the family are not feeling the way I do. But there is something about it that is just so, whatever that is, it can't be understood. But that's the difference between what you were talking about before and that, and how other people look at us. But because there is that Jewish something that's so ingrained in us, it's been carried down so long.
Yes and no. Yes and no. So yes, but not exclusively. So otherwise we couldn't have people convert. So there is the Jewish neshama was stamped at Sinai with like branded. You are a Sinai stander, and that was it. And our neshamas come through, and we are Sinai people. So we have a more natural connection. However, all of humanity is created in the image of God. And every single human being has that spark of divinity in them from which they can grow their relationship. Everybody is connected to God. Adam and Eve were not Jewish. Noah was not Jewish. Ruth originally was not Jewish. Yitro was not Jewish. Pharaoh's daughter was not Jewish. Rabbi Akiva's parents converted. Onkelos, our main commentator, was a convert. So it is something that but what has to happen is a Jewish person has a natural connection. Now you could say, is that good or bad? It's like, well, it gives you an advantage in that it's there, but I'll just tell you something kind of funny. It also sets up an anti-force. So I'll give two examples. One is when we celebrate a child coming of age to bar bat mitzvah, a boy at 13 and a girl at 12. What are we celebrating? It says, we are celebrating that their reward for doing mitzvot is now going to increase. Why does it increase? Because they are obligated to do things now. And once a person is obligated to do something, there is a natural human reflex that does not want to be obligated. So a person who is obligated to do something has to overcome more barriers in order to achieve, which is why the reward is greater. And we're saying mazel tov on now you're obligated, now your reward is going to become greater because we know you have a resistance to it. Same thing as with Jews and non-Jews. Being Jewish means being born with resistance to this neshama connection, which is why if someone tells me that someone's atheist, I'm like, they're Jewish, because that is just a Jewish thing. I remember Rabbi Yom Tov Glazer at Aish HaTorah. He said, I can always tell when I have an audience of Jews versus non-Jews. The non-Jews are leaning forward, so interested. And the Jews are like, I dare you to impress me. And what happens? Often, as soon as a person converts, a person before they convert is very gung-ho. And once they become Jewish, they're like, I'm not so interested, whatever, because there has to be a balance. You have to have free choice. So if you're going to be given this extra neshama connection, which is really powerful, there has to be an equal and opposing choice on the other side. Otherwise, we would be like robots. I am a Jew. I do what God says. It's like, nope, I've got this neshama connection. And so I'm going to have a pull to the other side. Now, some people say, I don't have a pull. It's like, yeah, everybody has something. Everybody has some area of Jewish law that they resist. And if they don't resist a lot, they resist a little. Because it's like, I just want to do it my way. And that's a Jewish thing. I want to do it my way. So that's our challenge. So yes, there is that neshama. Thank God for it. And then we have also the idea that many people who convert, that they belonged to the peoples when God took the Torah around. The other nations voted democratically. And maybe all the other nations said no, but they didn't say no monolithically, some of them said yes. So what about those souls? Should they be deprived? So they're not deprived. They have an opportunity. They have to make more of an effort. They don't get to be carried on the coattails of their people. They have to make more of an effort to join the Jewish people because they weren't part of a group. That's the whole thing, even for Jewish people. Why do we say don't separate yourself from the community? Why is it better to daven with a minyan or to go to shul? It's because when we're together, we benefit from the kind of the pull of everybody doing it. When everybody's doing it, it's not as hard to do it. This is why I think, Jewish women make themselves crazy talking about preparing for Pesach. But when you know that everybody is doing it, you kind of like get on the bandwagon because we are social beings. And when everybody's doing something, it's easier. And when they're not, you have to fight harder. So Jewish people, and then, that's why we try to, it's not just for the halachas of like living within walking distance of a shul. One of the things I remember I'm hearing from a rabbi in the conservative movement at the Melton School in Israel. He said the biggest mistake that the conservative movement made was saying that they would allow driving on Shabbos. They did it they thought they were going to help. Oh, well, at least people will just drive and they'll come to shul. But what it did is it caused people to leave and move out of Jewish neighborhoods, and they lost the whole structure. So he wasn't saying it was a mistake halachically, like whatever about driving. He was saying the unintended consequences of that was the flight to suburbia, and it entrenched it, and it made it like a thing, and then you just made everything harder. And they're like, why are my kids participating? It's like, well, look where you live. What environment did we just create for ourselves? We made it impossible. And then we get upset that they chose Boy Scouts over Hebrew school. Seriously? Who wouldn't? Lori Palatti used to say that she called the Hebrew school Jew jail. It's like, that's where like, right. Who would choose that? Unless you're weird like me. And I happen to like Hebrew school. I was weird. I was an exception. You don't plan for that to succeed. It's not a plan. It's not.
Yeah.
So, all right. We're challenged. We do the best we can with what we know when we know it. And that's what we're responsible for. Yes.
I'm sorry. What you said that the Jewish people are a nation, not a religion.
Yes.
And I was wondering, what is the Hebrew word for nation? What word is
Am Yisrael Chai.
And has one translation as opposed to, it could be this, it could be that, it could be,
we are Am Yisrael, and we are called a Goy Kadosh, a holy nation, and a Goy Kadosh, a holy nation, and Am Yisrael. We are a people that anyone is welcome to join. Okay. So we are not an exclusive people, but we are a nation. Talk about one nation under God. That's us. Like we are God's people. That's not a religion. That is a religion is something else.
Yeah. So I'm already thinking, ooh, this is going to be a good conversation over my Shabbat dinner. So I just want to make sure.
This is why intermarriage is hard. Yes. Because we are a nation with a mission. And when you have a mission, it's not because you don't like the other people. It's like you need people who are sharing the mission. Yeah. Otherwise, it's like saying, I'm going into business and I'm a psychiatrist and I want to have a psychiatrist working with me, but there's this really, really, really lovely, painter, artist. She's so good. I think I'll go into practice with her. It's like, how does that help your practice of being a psychiatrist? It's like, well, it doesn't, but I'll do the psychiatry and she'll do the arts. Like, you're not going to be a successful practice. So, and I remember my parents, when they said we could not date non-Jews. And she said, the reason you can't date them is because you can't marry them. And the reason you can't marry them is because we are an enterprise. We are a business. We are an enterprise. People who can do it. Now, I know many people are fortunate to have non-Jewish spouses who support the enterprise. And that's very wonderful when that happens. It's not the same as having somebody who is sharing the enterprise with you. It's just not the same.
And it goes back to what Helene says, because, you know, I'm one of those people who married somebody who is very supportive. We've never done anything Christian in the house at all. No Christmas, no nothing. He had moved away from it before we met. So I was like, this will work. Good. But he doesn't have what Helene was talking about, or in what Renee was talking about, that innate, whatever it is, you know, understanding of the mission of what it means. And so,
it's right. It's a shared. I mean, think about when somebody gets married. We talked about, I don't know when we talked about this most recently. I'm sorry, when someone gets engaged, what is the blessing we say? May you merit to establish a Bayit Ne'aman, a faithful home in Israel, not meaning the land of Israel, among the Jewish people. May it be a Jewish home. Not, hope you guys have a good life, have fun, you know, go on lots of vacations. I hope you get to do that too. But that's not the main point. The main point is establishing the Jewish home, which was Bilam's blessing. When he said, what's the main point? Matovu ohalecha Yaakov. How goodly are your Jewish homes, Jacob. The foundation of the whole thing, which is why, kind of tying it to the end, which is why Balak was successful in undermining the holiness of the Jewish home by enticing the Jewish men into illicit relationships. That's more damaging than any kind of battle or confrontation. Okay, in a battle or confrontation, people die, people live. But when you undermine the sanctity of the Jewish home, then you've done some serious damage. Then you've hurt something. That's our core investment. And talk about something that's counterculture. People don't even consider their homes like anything important, you know. When our daughter was remodeled, when they bought their apartment in New York and they remodeled it, the contractor said, do you plan to cook in this kitchen? And she's like, of course. She says, well, a lot of people don't. You know, they have a microwave or whatever, and they warm up food, they go out to eat. Their home, and I'm not saying that cooking meals is the definition of a Jewish home, but I've never met a real Jewish home. There was not cooking involved. It's like not a thing. So it's like people are just use it as like a stopover place, you know, like shower, go to sleep and grab something. It's not the focus of the whole thing. We are mourning the destruction of the temple, and we are significantly impacted by it, but we would be more impacted by the loss of the Jewish home than by the destruction of the temple. You destroy that, then you've really destroyed the Jewish people.
Yeah, right. That's really important.
All right, ladies, here we are. We are the Jewish homes. Do the best we can with what we've got, when we've got it, and surround ourselves with other people who share the mission. Seriously, it's the ultimate support group. This is not another reason why this isn't a religion. You can't do this by yourself. You cannot be Jewish on your own. I mean, if you had to, but it's not so successful. All right, ladies, have a wonderful Shabbos. I'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you. Feel better, Ellyn.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Oh.